three hostages get off the plane and be on American soil, and to see their smiling faces was wonderful. It was difficult for a number of us who have been so involved in trying to get out of Warmbier back. I, as you know, spoke with the North Koreans repeatedly and did all I could to try to get out of Warmbier back. He did come back. Unfortunately, he was in a vegetative state and, frankly, had been so for about 16 months. We were not told that during our discussions with the North Koreans, and this goes to both the opaque nature of that regime and the evil nature of that regime. And so, of course, delighted that these three hostages are back, and so wish that things had been different 2 years ago, 18 months ago, that we would have had a different result. What's changed? I think what's changed is there's now a dialogue, a direct dialogue between the two countries. As you may recall, during the outer Warmbier period, I called for such a dialogue, saying that I did not believe the North Korean regime should be given any credit for releasing hostages, because they never should have been taken in the first place, but that because of their nuclear weapons, their means to deliver them, because of issues like out of Warmbier, it was necessary to have direct communication. I think that could have made a difference. And now we have that, and apparently it is making a difference. I think something else has changed, which is that the Trump administration, both through diplomacy and what I mean by that really is getting the rest of the world, the United Nations sanctions in particular, focused on North Korea, tightening those sanctions, and also through letting the North Koreans know that we are willing to flex our muscle and project force if necessary, including exercises in the region. So I think those two things, tightening those sanctions, getting the international community involved, and then the willingness to demonstrate that we have the military force to be able to use if necessary, I think has made a big difference.
So looking forward to the summit, which we're told we'll find out about the details in about 3 days or so, does this experience give you any path forward for the president to make concrete progress in that summit? I mean, as you say, you've dealt with North Koreans, you know how opaque they can be. Are you seeing some glimmer now to actually have concrete progress?
Trust but verify. You know, every administration over the past 40 years has tried this with North Korea and been unsuccessful. There have been agreements that the North Koreans have not maintained their part of. They have consistently made commitments they haven't kept. So I think you have to be careful. But I think it's necessary to have the communication directly, and I think it's necessary to have the opportunity to talk about all these issues, including the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And my understanding is that these discussions are ongoing to prepare for a successful meeting, and I think that's very good news. I also think that with regard to North Korea, we have to have China very involved, because I think ultimately the implementation of any kind of agreement will depend in part on other countries being engaged and bought into this, and in particular China. So I know that that is an ongoing discussion with China, and I think that's very important as well.
As these talks are going forward with North Korea, we have also the issue in Iran. And I wonder about how the one may affect the other. In Iran, we had a deal to hold off on nuclear weapons for a period of time. There is nobody that I've heard that says they were violating that agreement. The concern is rather about ballistic missiles and some of the terrorism they're sponsoring in the area. Does this at all undermine the belief that the United States sticks to its agreements when it makes them?
Well, it's an interesting situation, isn't it? Because the Congress of the United States, as you know, voted, a majority of members of Congress voted against the agreement when we were given the opportunity. Most of us opposed it. Some of us opposed it for the very reasons you're talking about, not including ballistic missiles, not dealing with the terrorist activity in the region, including Hezbollah, which obviously is a big issue right now as we talk today with regard to what they're doing in Syria and in Lebanon. But also, we just thought the agreement itself was flawed, and that includes the verification process. It certainly includes the sunset. As you know, David, this sunsets in 12 years. And so I think there's an opportunity now to go back and working with our European allies, most of whom are interested in working with us on this, to try to tighten up aspects of that agreement as well. And I know some of the sanctions may be reimposed, but others will not, giving a period of time for such a negotiation. So my hope is that what happens in North Korea actually has a positive impact, you know, showing the Iranians that the United States is serious about having an agreement that actually results in the denuclearization and dealing with other issues such as the ballistic missiles and terrorist activity.
Senator, finally, even as Secretary of State Pompeo is coming back from North Korea, the question about his successor is before you in the Senate. That's the question of the nomination of Gina Haspel. Where does that stand? Do you have any doubts that she will be the next director of the Central Intelligence Agency?
I think it'll be a very tight vote, unfortunately, because I think she deserves more support than she is apparently going to get. I think she is a patriot who has stood there for all of us, all my constituents and all the families I represent at very difficult times, particularly after 9/11, and followed the law. She's a consummate professional. People at the agency are very strongly in support of her. As you know, former CIA directors, former secretaries of state of both parties have supported her. I think it's significant that people like James Clapper have stood up and said, you know, she's the right person to lead because they worked with her. They know her. She's not a Democrat. She's not a Republican. She's a career person who has put her life literally on the line at times for us. And so I think she deserves our support. And I think she will lead the agency as the first female director in its history in a professional way that I think all members of Congress should want.